Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another video from Fanboys Forever. And today we will be ranking the wave. That's right, we're going to be ranking a wave of Marvel Legends figures today. And we're here to put them in order from the ones that I believe, in my own personal opinion, to be the worst all the way to the very best. Anytime that there's a particularly strong wave of figures, it's always kind of difficult to just flat out say that one is bad, or sometimes in a strong wave, if one makes it to the bottom of the list, doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, it just means it's the weakest. Sometimes we have to be selective about which ones we grab and why, so this is just my own personal little guide for you on that. As with any of my opinion videos, of course it's always subjective. That means that my opinions aren't necessarily right or wrong, and your opinions are just as valid as mine. So as always, please make sure that you comment below and let me know how your list would differ or be the same. I would love to hear about it either way below. With that out of the way, I'll just quickly explain what this wave of X-Men figures even is for the uninitiated. Jonathan Hickman has done kind of a blockbuster run on the X-Men fairly recently in the last couple of years. And this has been such a huge event in the history of the X-Men comics. And the X-Men, of course, got kind of a facelift visually before the series of books, so this wave is meant to kind of commemorate that. I may make a few references to just some of the broad strokes of the comic series, and I highly suggest you read it yourself. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it. So you can see that we have 7 different figures in this wave, and we're going to start, as I said, from the bottom of the list all the way to the top with our rankings. So for the bottom part of the list, I've really struggled about what direction to go in, because I don't necessarily hate or even strongly dislike any of the figures in this wave. However, but if I had to go with one that I think was probably the weakest, and this has a lot to do with missed opportunities, it would definitely be the Jean Grey Marvel Girl figure. Now, I really, of course, love this character, and I love the look of the figure and the character herself. You know, the costume is really a great representation of Marvel Girl's classic look. You have the greens and the yellows there. The hair sculpt looks really nice, and I really think that visually the figure looks great. I think they did a good job on the head sculpt, and the paint application is all right. On the eyes, I've seen much worse. And even the layering of the mask, where you can still see the eyebrows and everything, I think that's some good details. She doesn't necessarily remind me of classic X-Men artwork from the 60s, but more or less reminds me of her get-up from some of the later issues, not the original Jack Kirby run. I love everything about the look, but when it comes to functionality and accessories, that's really where the figure falls flat. You can see that we have a cut at the skirt there, and honestly, this is as far as I can get the legs out, which is not very good for a Marvel Legend. Forward, this is as far as it goes, and as insane as that seems, that really is as much as I can do without just totally warping out the skirt. That renders pretty much any articulation below the waist pretty much useless, including these double jointed knees here. So I think that's a real shame. Everything else works just fine, but it really limits what you can do with her. And a lot of the time, as you can see, I can't even get her to stand. These boots with the heels on them, it just really doesn't lend itself to a very functional and posable action figure. So that's definitely why she's at the bottom of the list for me. It has more to do with just being able to use the figure. So we'll get into accessories very quickly because she doesn't come with many. Of course, she comes with a piece of the Trisentinel back there, but we also get these 2 alternate hands, and you can see she doesn't want to stand up. So she's proving my point for me. There we go. The only other thing that she comes with is one of these little like plants from Krakoa, the island that the X-Men and all other mutants really live on in the series. And it has a really cool sculpt of a flower. I like it, but I feel like it was just thrown in because they couldn't figure out what else to put in there. So she just doesn't come with many other interesting things. And I feel like overall she is sort of a missed opportunity. So I would say Jean Grey is at the bottom of the list. Next up, in 6th place, I would have to say that it is Professor Charles Xavier here in his get-up from the new series. Now, the funny part for me is that I absolutely love Professor Xavier's costume from the new X-Men stuff, and I think it's terrific. But there's just a couple of reasons why this has to be pretty far down for me. One of them is it's just the basicness of the figure itself. And it's really nothing to do with it being inaccurate necessarily, because there's really not much else to Professor Xavier's look in the series except just a black bodysuit. But, you know, there's only so much excitement you can get from that. There's also a whole lot of quality disparities with the Cerebro helmet on this release. For instance, you can see that the marbling on the plastic mix there is just kind of extreme on mine, so much so that it sort of distracts from the look a little bit and has some weird things going on. Then I've seen others where the visor is kind of messed up. So there's that's an issue. But there's just not a lot going on, and it leads to kind of a boring look. Even some of the articulation isn't as useful as I thought it would be. I can't get this to go forward as much as I would like. So there's a few different technical issues holding it up. Also in the comics, there's a couple of details they left out. In the comics, he has kind of like a line that goes down through here, like blue lines. I think that's the least they could have done, to have varied him up just a little bit and made him a little more interesting. However, I think that one of Xavier's saving graces is some of the cool accessories that he includes. He comes with some neat alternate hands right here, and of course a piece of the Sentinel, but by far my favorite that he comes with is this cool alternate head of Xavier using his psychic powers. So I really think this is great, and what's even cooler is that you can use this on your standard Professor Xavier in the hover chair. So I think this is a really cool piece. I really like the little effect that's going around the head that's plugged in back there. So I think that this really goes a long way to make it interesting. And here's a quick look at Xavier with his alternate head. And I just really love the sculpting on this and the paint application, what little there is. But with the effects piece back there, it just really makes it more interesting. And I really love this as an accessory. So overall, even though Xavier is not perfect and he's a very basic kind of figure, missing some of the details from the comic, at least he's more functional articulation-wise than Jean Grey, and his accessories are much more interesting. Next up, at the number 5 spot on the list, I would have to go with Magneto. Now, I love Magneto's new look, and it's very reminiscent of what he has been wearing the last few years with kind of the sleeveless look, only it's more of your traditional 90s Magneto look, only in white. And I think the white and the silver combo looks really terrific. And of course, you know, I love this sculpt for Magneto. I know that there's some people who aren't too crazy about the head sculpt, and I definitely understand that it's a little soft and definitely has a ways to go to get the kind of level of comic accuracy they would like. But I still think that this color scheme looks absolutely terrific, and it really does look great on this sculpt. In some ways, this may be the best version of Magneto that we've gotten in the Marvel Legends series. But there's a few missed opportunities here. Let me show you the accessories. This is a bunch of alternate hands. In total, counting the ones that he has on, he has 6 hands. And it's great to have that as an option. But I'll tell you what would have been even finer, and that would have been some alternate head options. It absolutely astounds me that they didn't think to repack that Eric Lenscher, Eric Magnus, whatever you want to say, head from several years ago that we got in one of the old waves. And that head alone is very valuable because so many people need an unmasked Magneto head. They want to swap it out with the one from the 90s set. I just can't believe that they wouldn't have thought to have included it. They have the tooling. It would have been an easy inclusion. And I think that for me, that's what holds an otherwise really cool reissue of Magneto in a really nice new color. I think that that's what really holds it back. At the number 4 position on the list is Moira McTaggart. Now, I really think this is a cool figure. And even though she has some limitations, I think that overall, this is a very impressive release. Moira, if you're a little curious as to why she's even in the wave, if you read the Hickman X-Men stuff, you'll quickly realize that Mera is pretty much central to the whole idea of the plot of that story. So you'll understand very quickly after you start reading it. But there's a few things I want to point out here. Number 1, I really love the head sculpt. People have accused some of the sculpting work at Hasbro of being too samey with some of the female head sculpts, and I think this feels very unique. I also think it's just a very pretty head sculpt as well. I think the hair works very nicely. And not only that, but I think the actual body sculpt and the coat and even the little pins, look at the cool kind of intricate paint detail there. I think all of that works very, very, very well. And it goes with more of her scientist look that she has sometimes in the series. However, this is not the only look that you get for Mera, and this is one of the coolest parts of the figure. You can get a completely different look for Mera to recreate an incredibly pivotal scene from the comics where she meets Xavier in the past. I guess 60s, 70s, whatever you want to say this look is all about. And it's so cool because it has completely alternate arms. You take the coat off, you put the scarf on, and it's a completely different head. You also get two different hands that can be interchanged between the two sets of arms. I know that this is mostly the Gwen Stacy that they released in the Toy Biz Throwback Spider-Man series, but I still say this was a really cool idea and a great way to utilize this. Aside from her Trisentinel part, Mera also includes this book. Now, the one thing I will say is that in the comics, she is wearing green with this outfit, so I think it probably would have been cooler if they would have made sure that that matched, and that would have been nice. But other than that, I think this is really cool. There's still a couple of things that hold it back. The articulation is a little limited by the skirt. However, it's nothing like the Marvel Girl Jean Grey was, because you can get so much more here because it's a less restrictive skirt. It's certainly a little thinner, and you can do more with it. So that instantly helps her to stand better. It's much easier that way. So even with the heels, it kind of makes it a little bit easier for that. The other thing that holds it back is this really silly hand that they keep including that looks absolutely huge. The fingers are way too big, and they keep including this hand with different female figures, and you compare it to the fist, and there's no way her fingers should be that large. But really, other than that, I think this is pretty cool, and she's certainly a lot more interesting than the Jean Grey figure was. So yeah, not bad. For our number 3 position, I'll be going with Slim Scott Summers right here, Cyclops. And it's funny because, after a while, Marvel Legends has really just perfected the art of the Cyclops figure. They've done so many at this point, and this body in particular really lends itself well, I think, to the build and physique of Cyclops. And with just a few new parts and some new gauntlets and things, I think they've really done something nice that looks very much like the artwork. Not only is it a great figure and a good representation of his new look and the Hickman stuff, it's also just a good design in general. And I think that it really fits with a lot of the rich history of Cyclops costumes. If you're like me, I'm kind of I'm a big Cyclops fanboy, and even though that can be very difficult to do in comic continuity sometimes, so I just really like how this turned out. The articulation is there, the sculpt is there, and I'm going to show you a few of the accessories. So aside from coming with a piece of the Trisentinel, Cyclops comes with this head. Now, as you can see, he has an optic blast that's shooting out. Look at that. Oh! And it's a really cool effect. We've seen stuff like this with Cyclops figures before. I really like how it looks. Particularly, you can take it out, and you have the teeth kind of gridded, and I think everything just comes together very nicely. And here's Cyclops with the actual optic blast head, and it works really well, and it looks terrific. So what could they have done to have improved this guy? I would have loved to have seen some alternate hands. I would have liked to have seen the pointing hands and things like that Professor Xavier got. I think that would have been great. As it stands, he has a permanently optic blast hand, so it doesn't really, and it even has kind of a hard time reaching back there. You can make it look good in some poses, but that's probably my biggest complaint. Other than that, I do think it turned out really, really well. My number 2 position is the Omega Sentinel figure. So you can see that this is just a lovely sculpt right here, and the paint applications are just completely on point. As a matter of fact, if I didn't know any better, I would think that this were some kind of hand-painted prototype or something. It's one of those rare cases where something just comes out very, very cleanly. I remember having a hard time because there was a few different samples at the store picking one because they were all really nice and clean. And so aside from just, the very most minor of little paint blemishes, they really looked good. The other thing is that none of the articulation is inhibited, so the design of the character really lends itself to figural form. The other thing is that I really like the alternate attachments and accessories. So she comes with a ton of stuff. You have her more classic head right here, and then you have some alternative limbs, including this giant cannon, and these connect at the elbow, which is interesting, making them truly alternative arms. So let's get them switched out. And here she is with the more human head, and then we have the 2 different weaponized arms. And this is a very, very nicely sculpted head with these huge pigtails that are kind of just flowing. So there's a huge amount of plastic there. And then we'll check out her normal arms. And here she is with her two standard arms. Now, is there anything they really could have done to have improved the figure? Not necessarily, I don't believe. The only thing I think is really something that can't help is that I know that the Omega Sentinel isn't going to be the most exciting character in the wave for people, and certainly one that would probably hang around a little bit longer. I'm not really sure how the case packouts work, but I think that she might be one that hangs on just because she's just not as familiar to your casual buyers. But I just think in terms of just pure action figure goodness and figural representation, it's awfully hard to beat, but she has been beaten indeed, because in her number one spot, I can't help it, I have to give it to this incredible new Hickman Wolverine that they've done. This thing's a beauty, I have to say. And we all know that there's been a ton of Wolverine figures. I mean, almost a literal ton of Wolverine figures over the years, and especially from Marvel Legends. And this one, oh man, it just hits all the right notes. There's so much good stuff going on here. You have the terrific Wolverine body sculpt that has the proportions and height all just absolutely correct. The bulk is there. You have the cool butterfly joints like this. You have the removable claws right here, and they're not too warped. I may work on this one a little bit, but overall they look really good. You have some really nice boots and glove sculpts that are keeping in line with the new Hickman look for Wolverine. And I've always been a sucker for Wolverine's brown and yellow costume. And this, to me, is a terrific update of that suit. As a matter of fact, if I were Marvel Studios, I would be looking at the new Jonathan Hickman X-Men teams and really considering that that might be the way to go for some of those costumes when they get around to it. Because this is terrific. It's classic Wolverine, yet it's modern. Even the belt is on point. Everything about this is just perfection in terms of execution. The head sculpt is especially impressive because we actually get a smiling head sculpt for Wolverine. And you know what? It looks awesome. It's kind of a cocked grin a little bit there, and he just looks terrific. And this is very indicative of the artwork that we see in the series. But that's not all you get. You get an alternate head. And here he is with the alternative head. And you can see this is your more serious head right here. Now, for people who have read the comics, they know that there's some significance to this head. You can look and see that he has some graying hairs in the beard there. It's kind of grown out a little bit. And I just won't comment on it any further than that, but there's storyline reasons for that. And just to put it mildly, it is a sweeping storyline. So this is really great for people who are into the actual story. And it's also just great for casual collectors because it's more of a grizzled look for Wolverine. I like that there's a little bit more of a beard there. So it's just really cool. And this figure for me is just X-Men figures personified. And an honorable mention to the really cool Trisentinel figure. This one is a really lovely Build-A-Figure. It's full of articulation, even double joints there at the knees. There's even a rotation at the waist. The three heads hinge and move around, and it's just fun altogether. I think that this will be a really highly sought-after Build-A-Figure too, especially because I think people will want to have kind of an evolution of Sentinels, present, past, and future, and I think people are going to be interested in having this to kind of complete that look. And of course, that same may go for the Omega Sentinel figure as well, so we may see some demand spike at that time for these guys. So it really is worth it to collect every piece for this figure, which may invalidate the need for a ranking list, but don't tell. Alright friends, that will do it for my rankings video for the new Jonathan Hickman X-Men series from Marvel Legends. I sure do hope you've enjoyed it, and even if you haven't agreed with all of my picks, I'd love to hear your opinions down below in the comments. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our other rankings videos and reviews that are uploaded to the channel every single week. And as always, God bless you and yours, stay safe out there, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Take care, Fanboy out.